you going. Hi class. Wish I could be there with you guys right now, but me and Steph say hi, and here's my presentation. I'm doing the evolution of the performance of femininity in softball. What sparked this research was when we did our papers on websites of female and male athletes. I did Jenny Finch and Johnny Damon, and when I looked at the websites, they were really, really different. And Jenny Finch's website was really pink and sparkly with the logo, while Johnny Damon's was more block text and just very neutral colors. And Jenny Finch had a lot of pictures with her family and a lot of social networking opportunities. And Johnny Damon's had only one picture of himself surrounded by paparazzi to give this celebrity-esque appearance. And Jenny Finch's merchandise was the sparkly headbands and the bows, and that was advertised, while Johnny Damon's merchandise was things that were signed by him. So there is definitely a very different feeling for the two, and I felt like at that point that Jenny Finch's website was really performing a lot of femininity, and I want to explore that in a broader softball sense. Before we dive into that, I wanted to give a brief history of softball and its presentation in the media over the years. Basically, softball was invented in 1887, pretty informally in Chicago, and at first it was played as an indoor sport for men who wanted to stay in shape during the off-season of baseball. By 1934, the rules of the game were standardized, and women were then playing the game at that point. The women's softball first appeared in the Olympics in 1996. It's out of the Olympics now, but there's a big push to get it back, and collegiate softball is really exploding these days. The viewership for the College World Series for women had more viewership than the men's baseball College World Series. So there's a lot of limelight for softball right now. They're getting a lot of media attention, and that's interesting in itself because we can observe how softball players are being portrayed and how their performances of femininity are being highlighted through the media. And so going back a little bit to softball in the past, femininity has always been performed in softball, and that was surprising to me since I've just noticed it through the sparkly headbands and the Jenny Finch era. But softball's femininity has always been performed in softball through skirts that players used to wear and how they used to keep their hair down when they played softball, and all these kinds of things. And although the uniforms have very much evolved since that time, softball players were wearing shorts for a time, and now they wear pants, much like baseball. There still are other aspects of femininity being performed, just in other ways. But the most shocking one to me was that this is not a new thing, this performance of femininity. It's been there, and the way it has been chosen to manifest in certain eras is pretty interesting to me. But moving on from that, the question is, how come there's the need to perform this femininity in softball? How come this is so almost ingrained at this point in softball, this performance? And I feel like this has to do with pervasive stereotypes that are associated with the sport. These stereotypes are associated with all female sports to a degree, but especially with softball. Even just today, I was Googling softball players are, just out of context of this class, and the first thing that came up was this, and I screenshotted it because I was like, this just says that these stereotypes are not dead and are still very prevalent today. And then going further, there are some stereotypes of, oh, you play softball, you must be a lesbian. And this goes back to kind of readings that we've done about woman in sports and the association with being more like a man and being muscular and masculine, competitive and unattractive, and all these kinds of things that are really have made it so that women feel the need to perform this femininity, to hold on to the femaleness, and also not only that, but to make sure they're portrayed as heterosexual, because if they're not performing this femininity, then there's the skepticism and question that they're not heterosexual. And so kind of going off this into the modern day again, we come into like the Jenny Finch effect is what I call it, where today there's a hyper-feminization in softball with the bows and the sparkly headbands. Jewelry is worn a lot of the times in softball games, and there's a very much heterosexy image of the softball player, and again, a constant performance of femininity in order to prevent skepticism. And this absence of performing femininity makes people question whether or not you are gay or, you know, have masculine tendencies or things like that. And as you can see, like Jenny Finch is wearing a bow and a sparkly headband, and this has really started the trend of bows in softball and doing each other's hair and really performing this very pretty, polished aspect of softball. And then finally, one last thing I want to touch on that many studies of performance in softball don't touch on is the performance on the field rather than just off the field, because I do believe there is a performance of femininity on the field as well, not just in how the softball players dress in their uniforms, but also what they do, especially in the dugout. There's a very big emphasis on cheering in softball, and not just cheering like, yeah, you can do it, go, 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 but there's organized cheering in softball, and it really performs a very supportive network for the team. And I feel like this can be seen as almost like a stereotypical feminine role of support and doing things for the community, whereas we talked about with Johnny Damon earlier, there's more emphasis on the individual and their skill set. And so in a lot of media attention to softball, it only talks about their cheering and their dugout and their enthusiasm and their energy, but never mentions their skill set, never mentions their individual accomplishments, and even sometimes a player's talking and they're identified as the loudest player on the team, not even their position, their age, nothing like that. So I've heard that it makes the game more fun, and this also resembles early readings we did where early sports advocates for women's sports would say, would want to de-emphasize the competition in women's sports to make sure that it wasn't viewed as too manly or too competitive, since you have to be nice and things like that. So I think this performance in softball is very interesting, and I'm really excited to dig in more to that. So this quick film shows the performance of the dugout.
We want a single, just a little single, S-I-N-G-L-E, single, single, single.
Unlike any other sport on campus, the softball team makes even more noise than the crowd as a way to up their game.
Bases! We love free bases! We love free bases! We love free...
If I do see them getting really quiet, I will definitely yell over there, and I'll be like this with my hands, you know. It does help in the dugout just to keep everybody engaged.
And so anyway, if you have questions, let us know. Steph is going to handle that in her presentation too. So thank you for listening to me, and hope you guys have a great rest of class.